Hi, everyone. This week is all about classroom management. And before we get started, I just want to note that there are many, many examples of classroom management plans on our Canvas modules under the weekly materials list. Please take a look at them. They will be helpful to you for this lecture, but also for the classroom management assignment. All right, so what do we actually need to know about managing behavior as a new teacher? Honestly, a lot. That's a big old question. Teaching academic content is really only part of your job. Even though your title might be something like seventh grade math teacher, that label doesn't fully capture what you actually do. Because sure, you're teaching math, but you're also managing a classroom and all the humans inside of that place. If students don't feel safe, respected, and clear about what's expected of them, learning is going to take a back seat. And suddenly your job title starts to feel a lot more like professional fire putter outer. Now, one of the most important things to remember is that the first few days of school will absolutely set the tone. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect, it means you have to be intentional. You're not just managing behavior, you're managing students' energy, their focus, their emotions, their relationships every single day. So, some good news for you. If your first few days don't go how you hoped, please know that it's never too late. You can always hit the reset button and start again. Treat tomorrow like it's day one, week one, all over again. The key in doing this is to commit to your restart and follow through, completely follow through with your clarity and your consistency. So, when we talk about classroom management, we're not talking about old school authoritarian control. We're talking about the kind of management that helps students feel safe, seen, and ready to learn. By definition, classroom management refers to the wide range of skills and strategies that teachers use to keep students organized, focused, on task, and academically engaged. But we know it's more than that. It's everything we do, intentionally or unintentionally, that creates the conditions for learning. That includes our routines, our expectations, our tone, our physical setup, down to how we greet students at the door. Classroom management, you can think of it like your compass. It's going to help you and your students stay oriented no matter what challenges come up. With a clear direction, you will spend hopefully less time reacting to behavior and more time moving forward together. The goal in classroom management is not control, it's consistency. And when students feel that consistency, you'll see more engagement, fewer disruption, and a lot less stress for them, and more importantly, for you. We're going to do a quick pause and check here. All right. So there are 7 core steps to making a strong classroom behavior management plan. And just a little note, there's probably far more than 7, but I've condensed them into 7 core steps for us. It starts with your beliefs on behavior and then moves into what you expect and how your class is actually meant to run, how you respond to behavior. And this is going to include both positive recognition and what you'll do when things go off track, because at some point they will go off track. And yes, we will even plan for our worst days. And finally, it's not just about thinking it all through, it's about how you're going to put it into action. How are you rolling it out, reinforcing it, and tweaking things as you go? And we're going to take a look at each of these steps together. So, before we dive into rules, routines, reinforcement systems, we actually need to start with the why. And that's our first step. This step is all about your philosophy of behavior, what you believe about how behavior is shaped, and how students learn to regulate themselves in a school setting. Our beliefs shape how we interact and move throughout the world, and the same is true in the classroom. Whether we realize it or not, our classrooms become mini versions of the world as we understand it. Think about it. At the beginning of the year, when you're setting up your classroom, you're choosing how to arrange any furniture and you're putting things on the wall and you're deciding how your materials are going to be organized or just where you're going to store them in general. You're really not just designing a space. You're creating a reflection of your values, your priorities, and your beliefs about how things should work in that setting. And then we invite students into that space, which means that we are not just asking them to engage with school content, we're asking them to step into a world that we've created. And unless we're intentional about it, that world might only reflect our experiences and understanding and not theirs at all. So, in this step, I want you to ask yourself, what do I believe about behavior? Do I see it as a choice that students make or something that's shaped by their experiences, relationships, and environment? Because as we know, behavior does not happen in a vacuum. The environment we create, including how safe and structured and welcoming it feels, it's going to play a huge role in how students show up and how they engage and how they respond. This is also where your equity lens will become essential. How will you support students from diverse backgrounds, students with different communication styles, cultural norms, lived experiences, different needs than what you are prepared for currently? And finally, I want you to ask yourself, how do I want students to feel when they are in my classroom? That being a very important part of your philosophy and how you see it out in your management. Take your time with this part. Your philosophy is the foundation for everything else. It will shape every decision you make moving forward, from how you set up your space to how you respond when things get hard. Step two is all about setting clear, consistent rules and expectations. This is the backbone of a well-managed classroom. Start by focusing on positively stated rules. So instead of saying what not to do, try flipping it into what to do. For example, don't talk when others are speaking is just telling you what not to do, which opens up the room for everything else I could be doing in this moment. Instead, we will try to move that to use respectful listening. And we have to teach what respectful listening means, but that gives us a very clear structure of what to aim for. And it shifts the tone. You've probably seen a couple examples like be safe, be respectful, be responsible. We actually looked at a similar example in the PBIS MTSS lectures. And they're super common. Those like the big ones, be safe, be respectful, be responsible. They're common because they work. They're simple, they're easy to remember, and they're flexible across most settings and grade levels. In your own classroom, I would suggest trying to stick to 3 to 5 main core rules and choose wisely. These should be the rules that really matter for your day to run smoothly. These are non-negotiables. You could think of them as shared agreements for how we do things together. Something that I've seen a lot of teachers do, however, I've seen it mostly with older students, and I think it would be great across all grade levels and ages, would be to create those major rules with the students or to have those rules and then create the definitions with those students. That way, everybody's on the same page about what exactly those main rules are and what they mean. And once you have your rules, the next step is to teach them. We're not just announcing them and saying, this is what it means to be respectful and then sticking them on the wall. No, we actually have to teach them. That means we are visualizing them, we are modeling, we are role playing, we're making them into stories. We're going to build them into our lessons throughout the first couple of weeks, especially, but continuously. And we are going to do this so that students know exactly what those expectations look like in action. Step three is procedures and routines. Now, procedures are your secret weapon. They're the small but mighty routines that make your day run smoothly and help prevent chaos before it even starts. So for students, these are things like, what do I do when I walk into the room? Where do I put my backpack? How do I ask for help during independent work? What happens if I finish early? It might feel very obvious to you, but it's not obvious to your students. And the reason it's probably obvious to you is because you've been a student, you've been taught the rules, you had time to learn the rules and exemplify the rules and become now you're the queen or the king or the arbiter of these rules, right, in your classroom. But you should not assume that students will just know what to do or what makes sense or what is logical, regardless of their age or grade. And please don't assume that telling them once will stick. Think about any child, any teenager, any like soon to be adult or adult that you may know. Telling somebody something once does not mean that it sticks, but we need to explicitly keep those things going. It means we need to teach those routines explicitly. Think of it like a math skill. We're going to model it, we're going to practice it, we're going to reinforce it, we're going to repeat it again and again and again. So some key routines that you're going to want to plan for is entering and leaving the classroom, transitioning between tasks, working independently versus working in groups, asking for help, how to manage supplies and technology. And when these routines are clear and practiced, students don't waste energy guessing what to do. And you don't spend your day putting out fires. It frees up time, attention, energy that we use instead towards learning, which is the goal. But if you spend all day having to tell students where the extra pencils are and to move their backpacks and to remember that the bell doesn't dismiss them, you dismiss them, you're just wasting time. They're wasting time. But if we attack those routines from the beginning and we make them well known and well practiced, and to the point where students can say, this is how this class runs, you can focus on the learning part far more. Now, along with procedures is also going to go in the daily or weekly schedule. And the schedule you have that you work with or around, it's not just what you're teaching, though of course we need that, but the schedule is also about how you're structuring your day to support learning, connection, and behavior. A strong schedule does more than just say, first it's literacy block, then it's math block. It's going to actually build rhythm and predictability into your day. It helps students know what's coming, when transitions are going to happen, and when they'll get a chance to move, connect, or break. Something about the schedule is you want students to be aware of it, to be able to see it, to follow along with you. So nothing that's going to happen in your day or in your class or in the specific period of the day is a surprise to them. We're not really trying to surprise them in the learning, other than like surprisingly how cool it is to learn. We are trying to help them move through their day feeling unsurprised, but prepared to continue. So with this section, I want you to ask yourself, are you using your time with intention? Are you building in any kind of movement or brain breaks, or just like a minute to get it together to help your students focus and regulate a little bit better? Do you have time for community building or strengthening relationships, opportunities for flexible support, like working in small groups or doing one-on-one check-ins? Even if your school has a set schedule, you still have power over how your time is used. A 30-minute block of independent work can look very differently depending on whether students know what to do, if they feel supported, if they have a place to self-regulate if needed. And so when you create your plan, I want you to include a sample day or week that reflects your classroom in motion. Show how your structure is going to set the tone for learning and belonging. Now, alongside procedures, we also need to consider the physical environment, because how your classroom is set up has a big impact on behavior, access, and belonging. In fact, your procedures often depend on your space. Every classroom layout is going to tell you a story about what's important in that classroom. It shapes how students move, how they interact, and how supported they may come to feel. So looking at this sample layout here, just a picture I got off of Google Images, there's a few key features I want to point out or just notice in general. First is desk and seating arrangements. Ideally, they should support flexible grouping and easy movement, but that's also going to depend a little bit on your students. Are they students who want or use or work well within flexible seating? Or are they students who need specific seats in a specific area, because that is how they function? That's going to be pretty important thinking about the seating of everything. Students should also be able to navigate the room comfortably, meaning that they know where everything is and they know how each space in that room is meant to be used. Visual supports like posted schedule, labeled materials, classroom rules, cue cards, they can also help reduce anxiety and help students build independence about what's expected when they're in this classroom environment. And of course, accessibility matters. So you'll want to make sure that all of your students can access this space safely and confidently and can have a way to get through all of their needs. Now, I'll say this, the classroom pictured here, it's amazing. Love how big that space is, but not all of us get a space like this. You might have a huge open room, a room that's like weirdly configured, or like I did at some point, a literal closet. But even in the smallest spaces, how you set it up matters. The key is to be intentional with what you have. So, for example, in that closet space that I was in, my co-teacher and I, we tried to maximize the seating arrangements as much as possible. And we had a total of about 10 seats that we could fit students in comfortably. We're not trying to cram students on top of each other because they still need to work. But and that also meant that my co-teacher and I in this little closet have a very specific way to move around each other, around the students. It became a practiced game, and our students also knew and learned how to work within this small space that we had. And that takes practice, but it also took a little bit of arranging and moving ourselves around the room and pretending to be a student and seeing if this works for us. If I was a student here, what I'd like to say here, does this make sense? Does the way I explained this make sense? We had to do all of that in our process of setting up our space. Again, no matter how big or small it is. And I encourage you to think about your space and do it the same or similarly. Think about all the perspectives of the people who might be in there. All right, moving on to step 4, we're going to talk about positive consequences. These are the reinforcement systems that help shape behavior over time. Think of it like feeding the behavior you want to grow. When students meet expectations, treat others with respect, and show effort and growth, it's our job to notice it and celebrate it. Praise can be incredibly powerful, but really only when it's specific and sincere. So instead of a vague good job, we are going to do our best to try to be more specific. Something like, hey, I saw you help your classmate without being asked. That shows some real leadership. I like that. Good job. That kind of feedback doesn't just acknowledge the action, it tells the student that they're seen, that their behavior matters, and that the choices make a difference. So, if you're using systems in your classroom like tokens or points or privileges that students earn, make sure that those systems actually mean something to your student. A reward that motivates only one student might completely miss the mark of another. You can reinforce behavior in a lot of different ways, and we saw that in the reinforcement lecture week. The key is to adapt your approach to honor students' needs, their preferences, their cultural norms. Not every student wants public praise. Not every student is motivated by prizes, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, positive consequences are not about gimmicks, they are about relationships. When students feel recognized, respected, valued, they're far more likely to rise to your expectations and hopefully surpass those expectations. Step 5 is about supportive consequences. And these are responses to behavior that are fair, logical, and consistent. And an easier way to think of them, it's your negative consequences. Supportive consequences is just a very nice way to say negative consequences. But just because they're negative consequences does not mean that they're meant to be harsh or punitive. The goal here is never about making students feel bad. It's about helping them learn from the moment and move forward. So, for example, if we have a student who's misusing materials, they might lose access for a short time to whatever their preferred reinforcer is, or you might have them help the cleanup or repair whatever was damaged. That's a logical consequence because it connects directly to that behavior. Supportive consequences should always match the behavior, be part of a clear and consistent system, and maintain the student's dignity and autonomy. We're not embarrassing anybody because they didn't follow the rules, but we are going to have consequences that are supporting them and following the rules. When thinking about a supportive consequence in your plan, you should ask yourself, what does your progressive discipline system look like? Meaning that there are steps towards getting to that big consequence, but not quite starting at that high level just yet. How will you redirect, de escalate, or help a student reset in the moment? Will you use reflection sheets, restorative chats, break spaces? When and how do you involve families or other support teams? These are all really important questions to ask yourself. Having supportive consequences in place will help you build a system of accountability, reflection, and growth. Now, let's talk about something I hope you never have to use, but you might, and it's always great to have. It's a crisis plan. Every classroom needs one. Ideally, like I said, you'll never have to use it or activate it or even really think about it too hard. But if a student becomes unsafe through aggression, elopement, any other dangerous behavior, you'll be very glad that you had a plan in place. And for some of us, these situations are not rare. You might be working in a setting where this type of behaviors, aggression, elopement, students who might require physical restraint and support, these behaviors may happen daily, even multiple times a day. If that's the case, your crisis plan is not a backup. It's a core part of how your classroom functions, of how the people in your class all function. It should be clear, practiced regularly, and shared with every adult who supports your room. You'll also need to add in a layer of proactive supports where you're explicitly teaching alternative behaviors and opportunities to debrief with your team so that you can adjust and improve your responses. Now, if you're anything like me, you might not be great in emergencies. I've literally had to tell people in my life, please don't call me for an emergency. I freeze, I cry, and now on top of the emergency, you have to comfort me. I'm not great in the moment. But in my teaching life, in my classroom, I didn't have that luxury, and we don't have that luxury as teachers generally, because when things escalate, you, that main teacher in the classroom, you have to be the voice of reason. So even when your brain is overloaded and your heart's racing and you want to cry and you want to freeze, that's where having a really well thought out crisis plan is going to be incredibly handy. It's going to be your lifeline. A strong crisis plan is going to help you stay calm under pressure, or at least fake it so that you can move forward with your moment. It's going to help you protect everyone in the room, and that includes yourself. And it's going to help you respond with purpose and not panic, right? So, what should be in your plan? I want you to ask yourself these things. First, what behaviors count as a crisis in your classroom? And I think this one's really important because what may be a crisis in one classroom may not at all be considered a crisis in a different classroom. And it really is going to depend on what your students' population is, what your regular setting is, and many different factors. So identifying what actually would be a crisis is a really important step here. Then you're going to want to look at what your role would be in that moment. Are you someone who is going to redirect? Do you have additional support in the classroom that can help clear the room? Are you observing that behavior as it's happening? Are you documenting the behavior? Do you have someone else doing that? What exactly is your role, and also the role of any other adult who's in that setting? Who do you call for support, and what protocols are in place in your site? Very important, because we need to know who is available to us in case of crisis, in case of emergency. Who do we contact to let others know to bring in the additional support that we might require in those moments? And how will you de-escalate in a way that keeps students safe and preserves their dignity? Your crisis plan needs to be proactive and written down. It should not live in your head. It shouldn't just be something that you say, I'll get to it one day, because that one day a crisis might happen and you have no plan or anything to kind of reference because all that stuff was just jumbled in your head and you forgot about it, really. Um, Once you have any sort of plan down, a draft of a plan, I want you to try and review it with whoever your support team is. So we're going to start with the classroom team first. If there's more than one adult in your classroom, this plan hopefully includes them, and also you review it with them, you tweak it with them to see what actually makes sense. Maybe that other person in your classroom is great in an emergency. So if this happens, I need you to take lead and I'll take all the students out, or whatever the situation may be. Then I want you to try your best to bring this plan over to the rest of the support team. So these are people outside your classroom that have a stake in what's happening and are likely to be there in case of a crisis. And then tweak it and work it out with them as well. You're going to need to do this. And as you do this, you revise it. You revise it as your students' needs evolve. You revise it as you get to know your students better, as you learn what works and what doesn't work. And again, hopefully, you don't need to activate a crisis plan, but having a plan in place is going to help build confidence and trust, and also in yourself. When students know that you can handle when things get hard with calm and care, you keep your head level, even though inside there's a lot happening, your classroom now will definitely feel like a safer space for everyone, because our teacher has a plan, she can make it safe at all times. That being incredibly important. So finally, we have our action plan, and that is where everything is going to come together. So you can have the best systems on earth written on paper. Beautiful. But if you don't have a plan to teach them, to reinforce them, to adjust them, you just have a plan on paper. You don't have anything that's actually going to do something for you. So in your action plan, you need to think about how you're going to introduce these expectations and the routines. Are you going to model it? Are you going to role play? Are you going to create anchor charts together? How are you communicating with families? Are you going to send home a welcome letter? Are you doing a back to school night? Or do you have regular updates that are going to keep people in the loop about behavior in your classroom, or just what's going on in your classroom? And to monitor and adjust, how will you know if your plan is working? What will you do if it's not? Behavior systems are not a set it and forget it. They evolve, and they should evolve. They should keep growing, just like you, just like your students. So think of this as your teacher maintenance plan, right? Your job is to watch, reflect, adjust, because good teaching isn't reactive, it's responsive. Good teaching, as we know, is not only about content, it's about all the stuff that goes in there. And when students see that you're paying attention and willing to shift in ways that support them, that trust them, then their consistency is going to grow. Now, at every part of your classroom management plan, from rules to routines to reinforcement, equity inclusion must be at the center. This isn't an extra step, it's not an add on. It is hopefully the lens through which you're building in your entire system. Equity in your classroom management means teaching, responding, and supporting in culturally responsive ways. It means giving students voice and agency, not just expecting compliance because you said so. Proactively supporting students with disabilities, with trauma histories, with behavioral needs, and building trusting, strong relationships that help students feel safe enough to take risks, to learn, to fail, to improve, to grow. When we talk about culture, we often will focus on race or ethnicity, and that's incredibly critical. It really depends on who is represented in your classroom, and you're responding to their cultural needs and cultural differences appropriately. But culture will also include things like language and values and communication styles and even generational identity. This last piece, the generation part, is something I've been thinking a lot about lately because it's been in the news quite a bit, especially as we hear about more rising loneliness and disconnection among young people and especially boys. The reality is that many of our students today are growing up in a completely different world than we did. They're navigating different norms, different pressures, and in many cases, different ways of relating and communicating with others. Their emotional needs may be shaped by online spaces that you or I don't have any even knowledge or access to. Their cultural shifts and challenges may be things that we do not fully understand. And so part of being inclusive is also going to be checking our assumptions. Are we responding to behavior with curiosity, or are we just trying to control it? Are we creating systems that students can actually access, or are we making space for who they are, not just how we expect them to act? When you lead with inclusion, you don't just reduce disruptions, you build a classroom where every student feels like they belong. We're going to end here with a final pause and reflect.